And we are back. Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We come to you every Wednesday from 11 to 11:50, and we are here every week to participate in community with others who are doing good, Christians who are doing good in and around Indianapolis. And today we are privileged to have Nabil Salfi here with us for this duration of our interview. Before we get to that interview today with Nabil from Church at the Crossing, we want to tell you about our sponsor, the Comenius Institute. At the Comenius Institute, we cross three bridges. We cross the bridge into college at IUPUI, helping young Christian college students navigate their studies from a decidedly Christian point of view. They come and chat with me after the show. Actually, I'm going up to IUPUI campus and spend some time, about 4 hours up there across from Caribou Coffee. Second floor, if anybody wants to come join us there, feel free. We spend time there talking with Christian young people about their theological questions as well as the questions that they have to deal with in classes and in their disciplines. The second bridge we cross is into communities, which is what we're doing here on this radio show right now. We're glad to participate in community, and that particular radio show reaches out in lots of different ways. We've had over 150 shows. We've had over 200 guests on our program over a 3-year span. We're really happy to literally integrate Indianapolis in that way, with special emphasis on bridging cultures and specifically bringing black and white leaders together. The third bridge that we cross is into culture. And so I write and speak and teach on all different kinds of cultural issues constantly. You can go and see our websites, my personal website, warpandwoof.org, that's warpandwoof.org, or you can go to the Comenius Institute website, comeniusinstitute.org.com, and you can see all of our video presentations, all of my essays, all of those things there, all kinds of things that are up there that might be advantageous and beneficial. The latest thing that we've been doing in the last 8 months is a little episode we do every Tuesday morning, which is called Truth in 2, where we take a Christian truth and we explain it in 2 minutes. It's always story-based, and it's always something that grabs people's attention and gets them to think Christianly about the culture in which we live. But today, as every Wednesday, we come to you with a new guest, a new interview, a new opportunity to meet people in and around Indianapolis who are doing good. And today, Nabil is joining us here from Church at the Crossing, and we are glad that you are here to listen to Nabil and see him if you're watching Facebook Live. Nabil, thanks so much for your time today.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Mark.
We're grateful for the work that you do, but before we get to the work that you do, let's talk a little bit about you. Tell everybody about your context, your history, your cultural background, and how many languages do you speak?
Well, it's a privilege to be with you on the show. Again, my name is Nabil, and I was born and lived most of my life in Beirut, Lebanon. And I call this country a country of controversies, where you can experience like 5-star hotels and luxury at the same time. You can just drive less than a mile and you'll be in a slum. And I grew up in this context, and I grew up also with another lens to add to it, because I grew up where I was born. I grew up during the Civil War. So most of my life, I spent my life within like a 1 mile radius.
Okay.
And I was like almost under siege with different kinds of adversaries around us, and it was quite an interesting experience to me. And so the Word of God and the Gospel was very challenging to me, especially when it comes to Matthew 5:44, when it says like love your enemy.
Right.
And because when you're growing up in a context where as a young kid or a young adolescent, when it's like all your life is your church, your school, and your playground, or your community or neighborhood, and one after another, you see them flattened by the enemy through their shelling, and so you develop a different worldview, so it becomes a challenge.
Yes, yes. Now, you mentioned the Civil War, just for the sake of context for everybody, historical context. That was during the 1980s. Is that correct?
It started in 1975, the year I was born, and it ended in 1990. That was like the bulk of it was in those 15 years.
Okay. Yeah. And when you talk about the enemy shelling, kind of explain that for everybody, because Americans, we live in this very safe environment. So tell people about what that meant.
So Beirut is a city, is a metropolitan, cosmopolitan city of like over 2 million people now, and it's very dense. It's smaller in geographical area, so it's I would say 1/4 the size of Indianapolis, and it was divided into two sections: the east side and the west side. On the east side, where it was at one point it was a religious kind of civil war where between Muslims and Christians.
Yes.
So I was stuck on the Christian side because Lebanon has like a 50, almost at that point like a 50-50 ratio of in the population.
Okay.
And so there was division in the army, there were division in the militias. So shelling was like if you're like in on 10th Street, and you would be getting like snipers and shelling from like 38th Street.
Oh my!
So this is that close, and hand grenades and guerrilla fighters coming and sneaking and that. So growing up in my neighborhood on my street, I literally saw dead bodies. So that kind of shaped my view for years.
Yes, and it certainly is not any different from anybody, let's say, for instance, who grows up in very violent neighborhoods in the United States. But quite frankly, for most of us, that isn't our experience in this country.
No, it is not. It is not. It's a big country, but I would say it's as close as like if you're living in a really rough neighborhood, for example, in an inner city situation.
Yeah. That kind of setting, certainly, as you've well suggested, impacts how you view the world. Let's just take a short segue and talk just for a moment about the intersection with Israel, and specifically as it relates to your views of Israel and Lebanon's views of Israel, the Christian Lebanese views of Israel. And then I also want to ask you about Charles Malik, by the way, the famous Charles Malik. But go ahead, tell us about that.
Well, again, the country of Lebanon is at a state of war currently since the 70s until now with the state of Israel, and there's dispute about land as well. So this has been like an ongoing thing, but it varies between subgroups or subcultures within the Lebanese population, because the state of Lebanon is not at war with the Jewish people. It's not fighting the religion, but some groups take it to the next level.
Yes.
Because it's a matter of existence and kind of annihilation of a whole religion. So there are some like points that we disagree even among each other in Lebanon, because we want to make sure that we honor life, we honor people, and the right of existence. Yeah,
the right of existence. Did everybody hear that? That's not a phrase you normally hear around the United States, but certainly in war-torn lands, that's the case. But I wanted to ask you, before we get into the kinds of work that you're doing now, about Charles Malik, because and again, this is for those people who may or may not know the history of your country, much less of the United Nations. Tell everybody who Charles Malik is and why he might be an important figure for us to connect as Christians to Lebanon.
Well, I mean, he first, he's like a hero in Lebanon. He's very well respected at every level, with every group, because he was kind of at equal distance in his mindset and his teachings, and this helped him to kind of become like a major voice at the United Nations, representing Lebanon in a very objective way. And what I can summarize, Charles Malik, is like he was an advocate of peace, and that was kind of he got his shots, and he got also the heat from different politicians, politicians, because he did not align with their agenda.
Right.
But his teachings, his writings, is still used by both sides. It's like he's becoming like a separate school, and kind of unified, not unified, but like it's like a middle point school where everybody can learn from.
Wonderful. I think about Charles Malik often when I think about him opening actually the Billy Graham Center at Wheaton College in Illinois, and his famous speech for that particular opening was really quite fantastic about the necessity of saving the mind and the importance of our responsibility as the church to have a different kind of mindset, to not just see this as some kind of spiritual issue alone, but to see it as a whole issue for all people.
Yeah, he was a big advocate of holistic approach.
Yes.
And because when you're in a context of war and survival mode, your mind is so much limited for survival, and so you don't have the margin to think and dream about the future. So you become like very temporary, like immediacy becomes like your daily living.
Right. One of the things that those of you who are listening here now, as well as those who will pick up the podcast later on, hear this on a regular basis. One of the least taught doctrines in the church today is coherence. The necessity of helping people to understand that by Him are all things held together.
Yes.
The reason for warp and woof, vertical, horizontal threads that make up fabric. We're always concerned about the wholeness of everything. And so we don't want to have agendas in the sense of conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat, black and white. We want to actually have an agenda that's simply Christian based.
Correct.
And then to help people to think differently because of that.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings us to the centerpiece of what we want to talk about today, which is your work specifically at Church of the Crossing, but also your work overseas in Lebanon and also in the other trips that you'll be taking. So why don't you just kind of give us a panoramic scope of some of the things that you do, because I know you do an awful lot. And then we'll take a break after you kind of give us a universal, and then we'll dig into the details after the break.
Well, thanks. Well, God has been gracious and generous with me and with Church of the Crossing that help us kind of to have the ability to think of and about things that we can do, whether on the local and the global level. So, I mean, and my missiology and Church of the Crossing is kind of were like connected because I believe, I'm a big believer, and I'm sure like lots of people, like God is on a mission, and He's always sending us places. And it's a matter of like where and when, and it's like in John 9, he was telling the people around him, like, while it is day, we are sent by God to do His work. And this is the first time, or maybe one of the few times, he say we, not I. So He's including us on God's mission. And this is like kind of it's like the story of my life, or this summarizes my life. Like, I'm on a mission with God, and I cannot believe that He asked me to partner with Him. So wherever He takes me. So I look at the world as cultures, not countries. And so to understand the culture, so how you can serve them with mutual accountability. So because you cannot serve with like upper hand and lower hand. We want to make sure like dignity and honor, all of those, like keep the values kind of together. So this brings me to what my role is. My role as a missions and outreach pastor. Also, I do the executive pastor role, but it's all in all, I'm blessed to serve in a capacity to go and invite people to a relationship with God and Christ in particular as the gateway. Because the church, through my travels, I realized that over the years that church has fallen into a trap of brushing the church brand versus brushing the Jesus brand. So this is a big deal for me.
Okay.
Kind of like it was an aha moment. Like I try every opportunity is like, how can I move us from promoting the church, the local church, which is a great thing, but it's not the thing.
It's not the thing. That's right.
Jesus is the subject.
That's right.
And so I'm trying to help move us from one way to another. So I do that in an American context, in an Indianapolis context, and I do that in a Middle Eastern context because I'm blessed to speak both languages, English and Arabic, and Arabic is my native tongue. So I get the benefit of producing or hosting a weekly Arabic show that is kind of broadcast to the Middle East to send hope of Jesus Christ to people who speak Arabic. And it's mainly people from the Muslim background religion.
My favorite four-letter word is hope. Yes, right along with love, of course, but there you go. We're going to be taking a one-song break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking more with Nabil, and he's from Church of the Crossing here in Indianapolis, also a tremendous minister of the gospel in Arabic-speaking lands. He'll be taking off here this weekend, going overseas to the Middle East. We'll talk more about that after the break. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We're going to take a one-song break. We'll be right back. Those of you on Facebook Live, of course, I can't stop the stream, so there's that, Yeah, so we'll take a break here. Maybe we'll take another break, and then we'll end about 10 till the hour.
Excellent.
We do the 50-minute thing too, but we do have those breaks in between, and that stuff is important. HB tells me, at least in the communication world, that you go 12 minutes or thereabouts, and people.
My attention span doesn't go beyond that.
Yeah. So there's that. Everybody needs a break, and so that's what we do here.
Correct.
So, in terms of the church work, are you doing any teaching? I mean, in the church per se.
Yeah, I teach about missions and outreach and missiology. I'm in charge of that, and so we go from class to class, group to group, and every now and then I get the chance to preach on our in our sanctuary.
Okay.
Over on the weekends.
Nice.
Yeah.
Make sure that when we come back, that everybody understands missiology. Not everybody.
Yeah, it's a fancy word.
Yeah, it's a fancy word.
Yeah.
The other day I caught myself using the word axiology instead of ethics, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, think of your audience, I always got to do that.
Yeah.
You would be interested in this. I was thinking about sharing this with you from yesterday's class. Like I mentioned, I taught a class at IUPUI Tuesday and Thursdays, and yesterday, I don't know if you're familiar with the Netflix, or is it Amazon? It's Amazon Prime show called Jack Ryan. And Jack Ryan is a CIA agent. He goes in the Middle East and has all these adventures and whatever. Anyway, there's this great scene in one of the episodes where he's meeting one of the Arab leaders on the other side for the first time, who's going to connect him with, other people. And one of the great lines that comes out of that, we watch about a 5-minute piece, but one of the great lines that comes out of that is geography is destiny. Geography is destiny. And the concept, of course, then I put a bridge on the board, and I put two audiences on either side, and I listed geography and history and language and culture and mindset as the bridge, because in order for you to get from your audience over here to this audience, you got to know something about those things, in the middle.
Correct.
So anyway, I thought I'd share that with you today, just because that's so huge for you.
It makes sense. It makes sense a lot. Yeah.
And to get students, young people, to think, I need to understand somebody else's point of view.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, everybody will get the chance in their lives multiple times to lead across cultures. It doesn't have to be across nations.
Right.
But within the U.S., we have multiple subcultures, and you have to understand how to cross this bridge.
Yes.
So I'm big on, because for me it's a daily kind of mantra. I'm leading cross culturally every day. So it's become very kind of visible, vivid in front of me.
Right. But, there's a culture in every home. Everybody's got their own culture in their own house.
Yeah.
You have a culture. I have a culture. So it's just simply how we live, we live life, and that really matters to everybody. And our interest is not to tell people how they ought to live. Our interest is just to introduce them to Jesus.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. So one of the great things that happens for us on campus, and one of the missions actually of Comenius, was to actually, hopefully and prayerfully, have the chance to teach there. So it's a different kind of thing than Ivy Crew Impact. We're inside the university and have that opportunity, which is really a blessing.
It is.
So I continue to take classes there. So I'm getting another degree, an MA in English, of all things. And I'm teaching in the liberal arts department over there.
Oh, that's it. Gives you lots of networking opportunities.
Oh, and talk about a culture. Oh my word, there's a professorial culture.
Yeah, and experience it both ways.
That's right.
As a student
and a teacher,
and
talking with my colleagues.
And
it's so much fun. I mean, I just love the academic world, and I love my colleagues. They're wonderful people. We just sit and have great conversations, and they may not be believers, but that's not the issue. The issue is, what are you writing, what are you publishing, and, every once in a while you have an opportunity to have those conversations that go in a different direction.
Yes.
I was interacting with one of my profs. I was invested in a course this last spring on Civil War literature and culture. And one of our classmates in that course, African American, served in Vietnam, was really having some struggles physically. Got it. And the difficulty was that he just died recently. But during that time, when I was in that class with him, he and I had eternal conversations. So how do you pray about those things now? Not just knowing, just from learning that he just died.
It changes.
That's why hope is.
Yes,
I hope for him that.
Yeah.
And we are back. Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site every Wednesday from 11 to 11:50, and we're glad to be here with you. H.B. Bell, our producer, the wonderful man who runs Radio Next and has all kinds of shows. We've got great things going on at Radio Next, and thankful for the platform. Today we are having an interview here with Nabil Safi, and he is coming to us from the great Church at the Crossing in Indianapolis. And we want to talk, Nabil, about some of the things that you do at Church of the Crossing, and then we want to talk about where you're going to be going and ministering, and then some of the other avenues of opportunities you have.
Yeah. So Church of the Crossing has been in existence, if you will, as a church for the community for the last 118 years. So So it started like somewhere here downtown, and it's like after 118 years, 5 campuses, maybe 7 or 8 senior pastors.
Wow.
We're still kind of trying to figure out how we can serve Jesus for our community and in our community.
Nice.
So a few years back, our mission and vision has become like Go Love. It's becoming like our website, like golove.org. And now in this new season, new life cycle, we have a new senior pastor who's really passionate about evangelism and discipleship, inviting people to be in a relationship with Jesus Christ, to be followers of Jesus Christ. So we're picking up the language of like, go love one more person. Because, Jesus on the cross, like at the last few minutes, he won one more person to be in paradise with him. The parable or the story of the shepherd, like he loved the 99 for the one. So we're focusing on this language, and so we want to go love. And the church is a very generous and sending church. So we are celebrating that 20% of our income or budget goes to missions and outreach and evangelism.
Wow.
So this is a telling sign of the sacrificial giving and the generous giving of the congregation to do that. And it's not just about the resources, it's about the mindset.
Yes.
And so we are blessed to serve with many partners, and we do that through relationship partnership, not transactional. So it's just like we cut a check. We try to get involved in the ministry, send our people, train. And we look at it as a two-way road. So we learn from our partner as much as we support. So we have partnerships in Europe, in Africa, in the Middle East, and in Asia, and some in South or Latin America. So my recent next trip is to India and Bangladesh, and we are big believers of balancing the proclamation and the application of the gospel. So we use a lot of tools as gateways to do that. So for example, in India, we're partnering with a girls' shelter. And it's young girls who, without this shelter, they would be very vulnerable for sex trafficking.
Okay.
And so we do that as well in Bangladesh. And in Bangladesh, we go there and we just dig a well, provide a community center and a clean, like a house for young teenage girls because they wash on the river and they get abducted and raped on the river. So we do that. We provide the safety for the community, not for the Christians. So it's a 99% Muslim nation, and 0.1 maybe or maybe 98% and maybe 1% Hindu and less than 1% Christian. But we're empowering the Christian pastors and leaders with this, and we do that is that they invite people to the community center and we plant a church there. And because of persecution, people come in droves. They come together in communities for baptism and to become followers of Jesus Christ, because they know when they get baptized, they go back as a group for support when the persecution comes.
Right.
And when we go and ask them, like, how can we pray for you? Can we pray for safety? They say, no, pray for boldness. We know that we're going to get into persecution. This is something that here in the United States we have to relearn.
Yes. Yes.
We live in a privilege that, or maybe I would say our kind of persecution is different. I think the church is under attack here in the United States, but in a different way.
In a different way.
In a different way. So we try to do that in multiple countries. And in the Middle East, we have partnership with organizations, the church that support the Syrian refugees. And again, the gateway is to give food and shelter and all of that. But over the last 8 years since the war started in Syria, for example, we've been loving on over 2,000 families from the Syrian refugees with unconditional love. And then when we started worship gathering, the organization started worship gatherings that's not connected to the support.
Right.
Hundreds of people come and they become followers of Christ. Within their culture, they're still wearing the hijab, they're still wearing that, but they're praising Jesus Christ. And for me, that was like, because I come from Lebanon, I saw that happening in Lebanon, because I saw the tension with the Syrians were one of our enemies. Because Lebanon was under oppression for decades under the Syrian refugees. So the church and the people in Lebanon were at the crossroads. Do we reconcile, or we come back at those people and get kind of like, tell them like, hey, you get what you reap. So most of the churches kind of stepped up and reconciled through the Holy Spirit. I'm sure this is something I cannot do. But I was like in tears last summer when I saw the interaction of the church in Lebanon with Syrian refugees, serving them, and people praising God. And I didn't expect to see that in my lifetime. So that was like a defining moment for my faith.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay, so it's a new day.
Yeah, this concept that you're suggesting here today about our responsibility is to love, and you just mentioned the whole issue of you reap what you sow, but that's not our job.
No.
Our job isn't to do the reaping.
No, that's not. We cannot put ourselves in a judgment seat. Because, and I want to clarify one thing, because originally I was talking about like the word missiology, because we are partnering with God and we are sent on a mission. What's this mission? To show the love, or to express the love that we have experienced. And the word missiology, just for those who are not aware of that, this is a fancy word, I apologize about it. It's our understanding of the mission of God, of where God is going and what his plan, which is to save the world, and what he is inviting us, the church who choose to be in his kingdom, to go to the mission field, which is anywhere in the world, and anyone who does not have a relationship with Jesus Christ, to invite him or her to a relationship with Jesus Christ. And that's what we call, whether it's here in Indianapolis or halfway across the world.
Right, right. This opportunity that you have halfway across the world comes in lots of different ways. So this weekend you're on your way to Bangladesh and India, but you also have a radio show. Yes. And the radio show is quite distinctive, probably not a radio show that most folks here could understand. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the radio show is based from a need since I think it started in 2012, and the need was like over what was called the Arab Spring. We saw a lot of young people in the Arab world going away from religion and faith in God, whether it's in the Christian or in the Muslim world, because all what they're seeing, especially in the Muslim context, that it's not consistent with what they've been taught. So all the killing, the terrorism, all of that became like, wow, I don't want to associate myself with this. I'm just coming away. So lots of people are going to be we're declaring themselves like, I'm an atheist, so and there was a high kind of rate of despair and suicide. It became higher and higher. So we wanted to spread the hope, and so this is the whole concept of this radio show. It's a short radio show. It's a weekly radio show that it's conversational, like what we're doing right now. It's gospel centered and bringing hope to people. The name of the show is Kullu Tamam in Arabic, which is actual translation of all is well. And then we always go back, all is well, because we have hope in Jesus Christ and the power of the Holy Spirit. And we try to use the language that is conventional or is relevant to the community, and we always call for following Jesus. We use this kind of term, following Jesus, reading the Bible. And we used to do it on a shortwave radio, and we didn't have a lot of impact, but then we moved to the internet, and this is when it exploded. Man, it's like with targeted areas, it's like there's the magic of internet.
Yes.
And suddenly it's like you have like 10,000 followers and over 100,000 downloads and over a million interactions. And honestly, my phone is like the best device. I get messages, I interact with people on a regular basis, kind of telling them about Jesus. The whole radio program is telling people about Jesus and the hope through Jesus Christ. It's not apologetic, it's not religious, it's not political. It's just telling them about the grace and mercy and love of Jesus Christ.
You had mentioned numbers. What kind of receptivity are you getting from people in a public way? Now, I'm assuming that, and maybe my assumption is wrong, but I'm assuming that a lot of the interaction you're getting is private. Do you get any public positive commendation or even combative responses?
All of the above.
Okay.
On the private and on the public.
Okay.
And because people figured out that internet is a venue of freedom. When you live in a country or in a regime that you don't have the availability or the opportunity to experience freedom. So lots of our listeners, they go up on the internet with pseudonyms.
Okay.
So that they not be kind of caught,
Right.
And they express themselves, and lots of them have positive feedback, and we get a lot of heat as well. But what's really interesting is that we get interaction among listeners, kind of like, no, you shouldn't be kind of be combative or be condemning what we're saying. They're kind of supporting us.
Nice.
Because they realize that we're not attacking anyone else.
Right.
We're just talking about what we believe.
Right.
So it's been fascinating to see that.
It's really nice when other people step up and defend you.
I
Isn't
know,
it nice?
it's like an outside voice. Like
Yeah.
it's like you cannot beat that.
No, exactly right. So this kind of response that you get from outside and inside the church, talk about the response that people are having that, let's say, maybe live in the United States and have some kind of connection to this particular show, whether it be their patronage, through their financial support, or perhaps through the fact that maybe they actually speak Arabic here, they've come from a Muslim country, and maybe they're being introduced to Jesus in America only through an Arabic station. So tell us about that. Is that something that's going on?
Well, through our analytics, we know that the United States is one of the countries that we get listeners from. I haven't yet got any direct interaction through that. But a story from the other part of the world that would be encouraging for all of us, like a guy who's a Yemeni guy and who lives in rural Yemen and in the war zone of Yemen, in fact. He was working in Saudi Arabia, and he met a couple of co-workers from the Philippines and Ethiopia, and they became friends. And over time, they shared the gospel with him, and he became a follower of Christ.
Wow!
So he came back to Yemen, and he listened to our radio program. So he contacted me and said, "I want to get baptized." And I said, "Hey, I don't know any people in Yemen, but let me do some research." So I tried, and for almost a couple of months, and at one point I was ready if he had enough bandwidth to baptize him over the internet when I have like 2 people with me as witnesses, and he would do that. He and his family wants to get baptized. So he didn't have that, but then through a series of connections from several countries, I was able to help him get connected with a disciple in Yemen who invited him to a hotel that had a swimming pool, and a bunch of them got baptized.
Wow!
And they are being disciples now. Down. It's just like this is affirming that this is God's work, and so it's worth the investment.
Yes,
time
exactly.
and energy and.
Yeah, and our brother H.B. Bell is over there on the other side of the room amening all of this, because that's exactly what he's been doing for 8 years, is doing this internet radio thing. Tell us about some of the guests that you've had and some of the opportunities they've had to tell about the things they do and who they are.
Yeah, I've had guests who have like really powerful testimonies. Some people who've been like either from the community, from the Arab community, either suicidal or on drugs, and or they had some really bad family dynamics, and how God reconciled them back to their family. I've had artists and how they were able to introduce the role of music in following Jesus, and the hymns and chants and all of that, and what does it mean as a new follower of Jesus. I've had people talk about the ministry for orphans, and so we've had like I had a poet one time, and he was sharing a lot of his poems and how he's using his gifts for Christ, and
that's great.
So it's been fascinating.
That's great. Have you had any academics yet?
I've had maybe one person who is a teacher.
Okay, that's really
yeah.
It's really fascinating. So the issue that I think maybe some Americans would be asking right now, they're watching the show or they're going to pick us up later on, and they're going to say, well, you know, my first thought when I think of the Muslim world is terrorism. So how do you deal with those issues? Do you not deal with those issues? Have you had any interaction with people who have said, we hate the gospel and therefore, you know, we do not want you to be around?
Well, we've had that, yes, and we had a lot of that, and I personally interacted with them for hours, and we have developed a discipline of honoring, understanding, and respecting, and never get into argumentative situation, and taking all the conversations back. This is Jesus. This is what I believe. It's an invitation for you, and we are not asking you to do anything. We're not forcing you to do anything, and it ends there because. And they do the same, because in Islam there is something called the dawah, which is their version of evangelism. And it's like I listen, I say like, hey, let's talk, and I try to respect because whoever is attacking, you have to be careful not to take this personally in this kind of context, because they're attacking because I would say 90% is because they are insecure. So every time I start the conversation, whenever somebody's attacking me, it says like, hey, I don't want anything to deal with all the apologetics or anything. I just want to ask you a question. I have something that I'm sharing with you, which is, if I drop dead tomorrow or today, I have the confidence of going to heaven. I just want the same for you. Is this something that you have? Can I share the why behind that? And because this is something that's really bedrock for our faith, but it is non-existent in other faiths. No faith can give you the confidence of the afterlife. They can give you speculations, they can give you maybes, they can give you... So when you start talking about solid truth in the afterlife, it changes the whole dynamic and the conversation.
Yeah, it is an amazing thing when you stop to consider that Jesus' earliest and constant comments were about eternal life and the necessity of being born again.
Yes.
We're going to take a quick one-song break, but when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Nabil and end our conversation today as it relates to further work that he's doing, maybe some things that he anticipates doing in the future. We're going to take a one-song break. We'll be back in about 3 minutes. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio, Radio Next. So, Facebook Live.
I had a 3-minute and 28 song thing, man.
You do? Look at you.
That is too funny.
Look at you. That's why you're my twin, man.
Hey, man, you know, it's scary.
He came to my class the other day and he announced himself as my twin. We say that because we think so much alike, which is really nice. And
Lots of shared values, huh?
yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So I put my arm around him and I pulled him to me and I said, "Now don't we look alike?"
Inside out.
Oh, his
Inside
kids
out.
are going. They don't really understand that.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. This is the thing. You know, for instance, when just a moment ago when I saw you again to this morning and offered you peace, maybe we could end on that note of discussion of why peace is so important and why we greet each other that way. And you know, we talk about hope, we talk about love, but we actually greet each other with peace.
Yeah.
So maybe we could talk for a moment about that from a Hebraic point of view, shalom, obviously, but from your vantage point, your culture.
Yes. Yes.
That would be interesting, I think, for people. It is something that really means an awful lot to me, mostly because shalom means a lot of different things, but
Correct.
most of all, it means completeness or wholeness.
Correct.
And that's one of the reasons why, by the way, I love Malik, and I just love reading his stuff, and that's fantastic. This concept of wholeness and completeness, you know, we hear people in the culture talk about this all the time.
Yes.
They just don't have the underpinning and the framework for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because if it's devoid the gospel, then
Mhm.
it will not be
It will
accomplished.
never be whole. Never be whole.
Yeah.
And you know, we're not suggesting that it's going to be that way on earth. I'm always mindful of that line in Acts chapter 2, verse 31, which says, when he returns, the renewal of all things will come.
Definitely.
And I ponder that statement all the time, you know.
Yes.
But until that time, I still bear the responsibility for renewal.
Yes. Yes.
And I was just talking to some people the other day in a workshop setting I was in, and they were saying, you know, how do you explain this to people? And I said, well, just take housework, for instance. Every time you clean the dishes, you clean the house, you are basically restoring things to the order that they were given to you in.
Yes.
And in that way, you are practicing wholeness. You're practicing shalom, a restorative process. And it, you know, it's a small picture, but it gives people the reality of hands-on. Oh, you mean every time I put my hands in the dishwasher, you know? That's
Yeah.
important stuff.
Yeah, it's part of the order that God created.
That's right. Yeah, boy, that's a whole nother discussion point, the order of creation and how important that is. I don't know that people really appreciate the depth and breadth of that.
Yeah. So when you live most of your life in a chaotic context, you just got a blurred vision or distracted view of
Right.
what order is.
And how do you subscribe then to a whole philosophy that basically says life is in chaos and an evolutionary concept? You're going to tell me that you're going to hope that everything's orderly, that when you put your key in the car that it's going to turn on, but you're going to basically espouse a chaotic view of the universe.
Correct.
How's that work? Come on.
It does. It does make me wonder. Like, it's like in the deep, it's like the inner being of someone speaking that. It's like, do they really believe that deep inside?
Yeah, that's really important. So, one of the things I tell people on a regular basis is, you know, the only reason why Harvard can have an ethics 101 course is because they stole it from the Christians. They couldn't get it from anybody else, you know. And it, you know, it's ironic considering the fact that, you know, here we are in Harvard, and we are back, Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We're pleased today to be finishing up our interview here this morning with Nabil from Church The Crossing. Nabil's been telling us in the first segment about kind of an overview of his work, and then in the second segment talking about some of the details of that work. But here in just the last few minutes, the last 5-7 minutes that we've got left in our episode today, we wanted to talk about the necessity of how we get along with people. And one of the things we were talking about on Facebook Live just for a moment was the idea of peace. So let's talk for a minute, Nabil, about peace and the importance of that, how we can greet each other in peace as Christians, what that means for people, and why people want peace.
Yes. So I want to make sure that I share what I believe in that, because peace is not necessarily the absence of anxiety or absence of danger. So it's like it's something that's not innate to us. We're wired to live in peace because God kind of blessed us with that. And in John 1, he wants us to live an abundant life, which explains also the shalom of a comprehensive, like a complete life. And so when you see like culture struggling, I think they're struggling for two reasons. First, they either struggling because they have different values they're clashing values,
Yes.
or they have different set of beliefs that they became more important to them than obedience of God. So if God's kind of calling us to obey Him through peace, because He's the God of peace, then why do we greet each other with peace? Like in the Middle East, this is a very common greeting. So in Islam, it's like Salamu Alaikum, which is like peace on you, like I'm bestowing this peace, and the same in the Christian culture is like it's marhaba, marhaba, which is like I bring love and peace. So it's an Aramaic word. So both contexts, like they are seeking peace. So I'm strongly believing that every culture, every religion is seeking peace. It's just like the way we go about it sometimes doesn't take us to the right place.
There you go. That's it. Exactly right. And everybody thinks that peace comes out of thin air. Like, we should just be able to give it to each other.
Yeah.
But there's a basis for peace, which is justice. And then underneath justice is righteousness. And this always makes me think of Romans 5. The reason why we can have peace with the Father is because of the justice that was taken care of, because of the righteousness of the Son.
Yeah, and grace that was extended to us.
Right.
So if we don't take those in that order, and we understand that peace is not something that we want to give, that is something that we receive.
Yes.
And it's when we receive it, we're humbled, and we're humbled. We're just like, then there's a compromise, and then if the other person is not on the same wavelength that we are, then we have to extend this kind of grace to them, whether they share the same beliefs and religion or not. And then this is when the good side of the word coexistence takes place, where unity is not uniformity. And then I understand that I have different set of beliefs and values and religions and whatever, but you are a human being, and whether you are from the same culture or religion, and you are still created in the image of God. And my job is to invite you to become in a relationship with Jesus Christ if I'm a Christian. But my job is not like to eliminate you, so that if you don't agree with me. And this is where the peace principle gets kind of broken, if you will.
Yes. This concept of peace and justice go hand in hand. Actually, they're supposed to be righteousness and justice are supposed to be kissing each other, and peace, of course, is invested in that as well. But it is an outgrowth, as you well suggest, of something given to us.
Yes, and the Bible is very clear. Like we are to pray for the well-being and the peace of the city that we live in, and it comes in multiple. It's manifested in multiple ways. This is why we do good, because we want to give more room for peace.
Yes,
and eventually, how do you give more room for peace when you bless people with things that makes them feel peaceful?
Yes,
and because I believe personally, God has created us to do two things: to worship Him and to work. And by adding value to both things for people, this is how you help them kind of live a comprehensive and a full life that is based on peace.
The tagline for this show is do good, do good, do good, from Titus 3:1, 8, and 14. And that's the kind of folks that we want on this program is to do just that. Let's talk about one more thing before we break for today, and that is this idea of doing good, since you brought it up. One of the things that we've heard in the church for a long time is an emphasis on truth. And in fact, from Aristotle to Aquinas to other great philosophers of ages gone by, they have talked about something called truth, goodness, and beauty. I've often thought and been teaching that we should be flipping that around, that we should show beauty, we should do good, and then maybe somebody will want to hear our truth.
Yes.
What do you think about that concept of doing good so as to attract people to the gospel?
I think it's a gateway that God has given us, because He went roaming the villages and the cities, doing good and healing, He started with that, so that, and then he also started teaching.
Yes.
So and for us, like for example, when as a congregation, when we serve in the inner city or when we serve in the suburbs, like we go to the cities and we serve with communities or with ministries, like for example Shepherd or Shepherd Community or Wheeler and all. So is this about the meal that we provide? No. It's like we want to be there for the people, for our neighbors, and we want to develop a relationship. And once you have a relationship and a dialogue,
Yes.
then if you stand out as a good doer and a peacemaker, then the person would ask you like, why are you doing that? And this
Yeah.
is a question about truth.
There you go.
And
There
this
you
is
go.
the truth opportunity to share.
Right. I want to give you 30 seconds here at the end of our show to kind of finalize what you want to leave people with. Before we do that, though, I wanted to just say to everybody, once again, we're really happy that we can come to you every Wednesday from 11 to 11:50. We're glad to be able to interview some of the folks that are in and around Indianapolis who are doing good, showing beauty, and then, of course, sharing the truth, the gospel of Jesus. Nabil, here in the last 30 seconds or so, from your vantage point, if you were wanted to leave our audience with one idea, what would that be?
I think we have a wonderful opportunity in this day and age to use technology and communication as a tool to live out the gospel and to share the gospel. And I've recently realized that more and more people have access to technology than they have access to clean water and healthcare and education all across the world. And I think everybody has a responsibility if they share our beliefs to share this truth and share this love at least with one person. So I invite you to find who's the next person you're going to share what you've experienced. And if you haven't experienced that, find a person who loves you unconditionally so that you can openly discuss issues of life, because life is precious and life is good and we are living in the best times.
Wonderful. Thank you ever so much, Nabil, for joining us here today. And if you want to reach out to either one of us, you can find us on social media sites. Certainly, why don't you go ahead and give them that website again that they can connect with you on so that they can hear it from you.
Well, our church website is golove.org, golove.org, and you can look up my name and my email address. Please feel free to contact me. And I'm also on social media like Facebook and Instagram. And I have a lot to share more. I'll be excited to pick your brain and learn from you as well.
One more time, just spell your name for everybody.
Again, my name is Nabil Safi. It's spelled Nabil, last name Safi.
Wonderful. And my name is Dr. Mark Eckel. We're glad to be with you here every single week, and you can connect with me as well. And if you have any questions about anything, please hit us up. We're happy to chat with you about whatever your interests might be. You've been listening to Warp and Woof Radio at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We'll be back again next week. See you then.